blame that everybody thinks that it's the fish pie, and with him skirting off the pitch to
Yeah.
go to the bathroom when he was having
Yeah.
a panic attack.
Mm.
And I think that it's important we find out the root. What's
Yes.
really the problem there? Um, I I don't know whether a good fish pie is really good or they're all awful, but I think that we all have our fish pies, as it were. And what I mean by that is that we all have something that we try to. It's much safer to blame that is the reason why we're struggling, rather than getting to the root.
Hi, it's Stephen here. Welcome to the podcast. This is Challenging Leadership. And again, my good friend Jared and I are going to talk about one of our favourite TV shows. Hi, Jared.
Hey there. So this is going to be our second part of
Yeah.
talking about Ted Lasso.
That's right. And there's a particular episode that we're going to sort of focus on today. What is that one?
I believe that we're going to talk about Man City.
That's right. Yeah.
We're not talking about the gender man, though. What are we talking about?
Well, I think this is a double meaning of a title, because I think there's a big factor here. But actually, Manchester City is we call Manchester City Man City in the UK here. Now, I have to confess a kind of interest in this. So I was raised as a Manchester City fan. So I was a fan of Man City when they were rubbish and kept losing. And then they got a lot of money and sort of soared to the top over the last sort of 10 so years. So I am a Manchester City I wouldn't say supporter, because I don't really go anymore. I used to go back in the day, but I don't really support them I have a mild interest in the club. But so that's my confession. What do you think that the show is about? What is this episode about, as far as you're concerned?
Well, man, that's a tough one to answer in just one sentence. But there is there's so much to unpack. But I'll just start with the fact that I think that there's a breaking point with Ted's struggle with his um, uh, his anxiety, the struggles he had in his personal life, and we learn a very key element about him in this episode that explains a lot. And I think that we mentioned a little bit about mental health in the first episode, but this one gets a little bit deeper into it.
Yeah.
And maybe I self-correct myself when I say Man City. There's a stereotype about men don't talk about their feelings, and he's had this constant avoidance with the club's therapist, Dr. Sharon, and he does everything but gets the help that he needs.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this big situation. I guess you have to do a little bit of backtracking there. Jamie Tartt's father, huge Man City fan supporter. Jamie Tartt actually got sent back to Man City, and then he came back. So there's a lot that went on between season 1 and season 2, but there's a very strong confrontational moment in the locker room, and we can talk about that as well. But just going back to that, it affected Ted so much that he actually just had one of those episodes where he fled and he called Dr. Sharon. And, that's, and there's a lot more to it in that episode as well, but that's kind of something that we can delve into.
Yeah, definitely. So I think you're right in that it's a clever name for the episode, because I think it is exploring a lot about the way that men in particular, but of course also explores Dr. Sharon Fields, who's his psychiatrist or psychotherapist. So it's not just a stereotype about men, but there is quite a lot of scenes. There are a lot of scenes where men are talking together, and you see these stereotypes. So first of all, you see Roy and the coach Beard talking to each other, not wanting to sort of talk about their personal life. Nathan, who's a bit of a different sort of man, he's kind of excited to be the spokesman for Keely's whatever it is she's doing.
Mhm.
They don't want to do
Yeah,
that because they're typical men. We don't like to
that's
talk
right.
about our feelings.
That's a
So,
that's a perfect impersonation of Roy Kent there, I
yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I can do a good Roy Kent. But there's that element going on. So the Beard and Roy are typical, I suppose, typical men, if you like, in that they
Yeah,
don't want to talk about their
sure.
feelings. They don't want to talk about their private life, what's going on. It's none of your business. Just let me get on with my life, sort of thing. And I think that scene is meant to say that. This is
Sure.
what we think about as men. Ted, he obviously has this terrible secret that he's kept with him for
Mhm.
for his whole life. Well, for a lot of his life, which again, spoiler alert. Of course, we're going to spoil things. Um,
Yeah.
Ted's father took his own life when Ted was a young man, and so this is this terrible sore that's there, and it explains a lot of his behaviour in terms of his trying to deflect using humour, and he's always upbeat, he's always jolly and happy, and goofy as
Mhm.
you say in America, um, but this is part of it is that defense mechanism that he's built up around himself over the years. But I think we also learn about Jamie Tart as well because, his
Yeah.
behavior is very much, is it any wonder that he's become the man he's become?
Yeah.
With the sort of father that he has. He's got an absolutely appalling father who belittles him and is just absolutely awful. So no
Mhm.
wonder that part of Jamie's sort of reason for being is his ego and to build it up. So I think we see a lot of that. The way that maybe we handle those sorts of feelings and emotions,
Mhm.
not great. Now I know that's not necessarily talking about the workplace, but it's easy to
Sure.
get onto that. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
for me that's why it's called Man City. It's yes, of course, the
Mhm.
team that they're playing is Manchester City, but it's really about men and their emotions, and how they handle those, I think, in many respects.
Yeah. This episode for me, I felt like if you're watching it from A to Z, I used another word instead of
Very
Z.
nice, A to Z. Yeah, yeah.
I always got to point these things out, But the the thing that I noticed is I felt like this episode finally everybody gelled. Like
Mm,
there was this ripple effect. Ted coming to the realization of what he's going through, seeing Roy Kent showed his soft side
yeah,
by really coming to
Jamie.
Tart's
Mm,
defense. I mean, there was just a lot of things that you can pick from there. But one of the things that I wanted to jump to was the therapy sessions that he decided to finally do with Dr. Sharon.
yeah,
But Dr. Sharon had it's like everybody had their mentor. Even Dr. Sharon was speaking with somebody who
that's right.
reminded her, you're kind of just like him.
That's right. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
and so I thought as leaders, do we have somebody we can go to? It doesn't
yeah,
have to be the Diamond Dogs, that group of peers. It could
mm,
be,
yeah,
that's great if you have that. But having somebody. So I can speak from personal experience. I have two gentlemen that I'm good friends with, but we also are in similar roles,
mm,
and we chat every Monday. We do a little phone call after 5 o'clock, and we
wow,
we talk about life and what challenges we're facing,
yeah,
and it's been so helpful to realize that one, you're not alone, but I think that it gives you perspective because when you're leading people, you really can't. We talked about sharing what you're struggling with, but you also there has to be a boundary there.
yeah,
And so if you have peers that you can relate to outside of that workplace environment, then you kind of can drop the fence. You can let your guard down and really talk about things so that you can get a better perspective on, hey, am I going down the right way, the right path, or is there something I need to adjust about myself? And you see a lot of those little sidebar relationships going on in this episode where people
mm,
are learning about themselves. Even Coach Beard has his own little journey. He
yeah,
learn he learns about himself. As
mm,
everybody, it's like everybody had an opportunity to figure out what the heck's going on with themselves
mm.
in this episode.
Yeah, and it's unreasonable, really, for us to believe that when we go to work, I mean, this is again where the my other favorite Apple TV show is Severance, and that actually literally is a different person who goes into work every day.
Yeah,
But for the rest of us, we cannot. It's unreasonable to believe that we can literally leave everything about ourselves as we walk through that front door to
yeah,
go to work. So, we are who we are. We have that baggage. We have all that stuff that we have to carry with us. So yeah, I think that is great advice to have somebody that you're able to talk to. And I think one of the things this episode does demonstrate is, as you said, that the variety of options you've got actually when it comes to that sort of thing. So yeah, they have this little group they call the Diamond Dogs, which is just a bunch of mates who are able to talk
yeah.
to each other. But again, that's there's a lot said at the moment about men and about men's mental health and some of the issues that young men have in particular. But I think this provides, actually, on a serious note, I think it does really provide some useful ideas. Yeah, have a bit of a group that you can just talk
Hmm.
with, and that could
Yeah,
be a bunch of guys similar to you, or could be different ages. Or yes, have a mentor, have a person that you can speak to and offload and talk about. These are
hmm.
really good bits of advice, and actually make you more
Yeah,
productive in the workplace if we want to get very mercenary about it. We are better at
yeah.
our job when our head is in the right place, and trying to carry it all ourselves is just not really possible for any length of time.
Yeah, that's so true. And I was thinking about in my book, I talk about um, not just authentic leadership, but talking about sometimes you try to lead so perfectly
Mm,
that you disconnect from everybody.
yeah,
So one of the things about Ted Lasso is that he shows his flaws, but
mhm,
he doesn't just show his flaws. He explains a little bit about why he has those flaws.
yeah,
And then you just again, I use the term ripple effect. You can see how it goes through his cohorts, his peers, even the team,
mm,
in a positive way where people can talk about what they're going through.
yeah,
And talking about mental health, there's there's a lot of concern that people just bottle it up,
mm,
and if we're leading a group of people, we're actually under an obligation to make sure that we recognize signs of somebody struggling. But people, again, can bury them just like we
mhm,
can.
yeah,
So, one of the ways you can break down that wall is if they feel like, oh, it's okay for me to come and talk to my manager about this because I see that he's open about things too.
yeah.
It kind of it builds off of each other. Whereas if you're just resilient and don't let them see you in weak or whatever. It's like, I know that's the old school mentality, but
Yeah,
it can do more damage than good if you're just always going to be that stoic.
absolutely. I mean, in Britain, in the UK, England, I suppose particularly, we have this reputation of the stiff upper lip, and so again, I'm not sure whether that's, of course, like all stereotypes, they're not completely accurate, but I think there is a cultural element there that we
Hmm.
do have to be careful of. Um, talking about setting an example, I think it's quite an interesting scene in the episode where they're just about to do their kind of um, hands together sort of moment, and Ted says, "Look, I just want to tell you that a few weeks ago when I had to go quickly, it wasn't because I had stomach problems; it was because I'd had this panic attack." So he's actually
Yeah.
sharing with
Yeah.
his close team. So I think again, there's a balance
Hmm.
here. So I don't think
Yeah.
you'd go into the dressing room with all the players and say, "Oh, by the way,
Yeah.
I'm suffering this and that."
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe, but I think that's less likely. But with a few trusted colleagues, he felt able to say that. But again, he didn't necessarily go into all the details of why he was having that panic attack. And again, he doesn't have to. So he was ready to share that little
Hmm.
bit of information. You don't have to go the
Yeah.
whole hog. He shared that little piece of information, but on the back of that, actually everybody had their own little secret that they were able
Mhm.
to share, which I thought again was, and I think that's the growth through the episode that you're seeing there. That's what it's trying to show you, is that they're finding ways of dealing with these stresses and anxieties, and these friends are doing that together, which I think is
Yeah.
is a really great lesson.
It is, and the other thing is, I thought about like when do admitting you having struggles actually get to the point where they erode the confidence of your team that they
Yeah.
have in you, and
Mm,
that's the worry, isn't it?
yeah.
I mean, we we want to be transparent, we want to be human, but if you get stuck in that, if you
Yeah.
stay there, that's where it's the danger zone. So one of the things that I appreciate about what they did is that it was almost a metaphor by the way they got totally annihilated by Man City 5
Yeah.
nil.
Yeah.
The fact that you face these difficult things, and then at the end they play the highlights with Benny Hill and
Yeah.
the goofy music, at the
Yeah.
end and everything, and they sped it up. But it was like you face difficulties, do you go forward? Because it's like if we trip and fall and lay on the ground, what are people going to think about us if we're more than able to get up and we just lay there? Oh, I can't believe the sidewalk, tripped me up, and we have those little moments. Sure, we get tripped up at work, and even as leaders, we're going to stumble. But do we stay there, or do we get ourselves up, pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, as it were, and keep going forward? Because
Yeah.
that's I think where even with difficulties, moving forward is going to instill confidence with your team that you're leading.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think that's sometimes quite a difficult message to get across in an environment where we've become much more aware of mental health problems than we used to be. There's still I think, a stigma to some degree, but not as much as it used to be. But there's
Hmm.
also I think, a need to actually be willing to say, do you know what? I am in pain. I am suffering, but I I must carry on. And this is a difficult message to land, because it sounds like I'm just saying pull yourself together, and I'm not saying that. But a belief that I need to carry on. I need to get some help. I need to have people to help me, but I also, people need me, and I need to find a way through this. And I feel like that was part of the message of the show too. So we also had
Yeah.
Dr. Sharon Fields, the psychologist. She comes off her bike, her push bike, at the beginning
Yeah.
of the show, and actually that allows her to show some vulnerability again,
Hmm.
and admit that she was really scared. Um, a shout out, by the way, as well, to witness Roots Maneuver on the music at the beginning of that show. I absolutely love that track.
Yeah.
It's a bit of London rap, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
But but yeah, I think that's very interesting. But it's always about, how do I recover from this? How do I move forward, as you said? And
Hmm.
that's a good message, I think, as well. We don't want to get stuck in
Yeah.
this place where we're a victim and we're not able to move forward. On the other
Yeah.
hand, we don't want to pretend that we're not suffering and that we don't have a problem.
That's
So
right.
it's a tough balance, I think.
It is. It is. I think at the end of the day, as leaders, we need to normalize seeking help.
Yeah.
And whatever that looks like. And then if you foster a culture of vulnerability, it's, I'm not saying you need to have the Diamond Dogs meeting every single
Yeah.
morning and get your whole team together and let's all get our tea or our coffee and cry it out, and and howl a
Yeah.
little bit. But
Yeah.
if you have to be really in tune with your people. You can't be so face down. I call it the working manager problem. Is that so many leaders get involved where they're working on projects instead of leading projects,
Mm. Yeah.
and then they totally become disconnected from what's going on with their team. So it's so important to check in and not just say, "Hey, are you doing okay?" Because I think that's like the how many of us have replied to that and said, "Yeah, I'm doing terrible. Thanks for asking." No,
Yeah,
we just automatically go, "Yep, I'm good.
yeah.
Thanks for
Well,
asking."
a common greeting in the UK, certainly the part of the country I live in, is "You're right, you're right." So basically, it's "Are you all right?"
Uh-huh.
You're all
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
and the answer to that is always "Yep, fine, thanks, good, you," and that's
Mhm.
basically it. So nobody, I say nobody in the history of the universe has ever said, "No, I'm not really."
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like you're asking people how they are, but you're not really interested in how they are
yeah,
really, and it's just a greeting.
yeah.
So yeah, that is one of the problems. I guess this episode actually resonates a lot with me, and I in the spirit of what we've talked about, sort of opening up a bit about your own problems. You know, I'm happy to talk a little bit about a time when I really suffered badly with my mental health at a job that I had. So this is going back a few years now.
Mhm,
Um, but um, I don't know, you know, I don't know whether you call it a breakdown or whatever, but I got to a point where I was just a I was just a bit of a mess at work. It was a job where I was part of the senior leadership team, and I, I I can talk about sort of why I got to that state, but I was actually in a really bad way, in a bad place. And I think I understand what happened there, but it's so
mhm.
easy to get to that place. I ended up losing that job because of that,
Yeah,
which was the right thing because I needed to get myself sorted out. I got some help. I saw a therapist for a while and was able to think through what had happened. And I, you know, I feel like I know what happened there, and I make sure I
mhm.
don't do that again. But it's so I think a lot of people will have experienced that. You mentioned about, you know, some of your own experiences, and I think so many of us have um, these difficulties. And so why should we feel embarrassed about them, or you know, why should we think it's a problem to talk about them?
Yeah, yeah, and it's so, I've never heard anything bad come from getting help.
Exactly.
I've
Yeah.
heard a lot of bad things happen when people don't get help. Starting bad, losing jobs, but also
Yeah.
worse than that.
Yeah.
One of
Absolutely.
the things that I thought about is trying to make a comparison here. Ted Blaine, that everybody thinks that it's the fish pie, and you know, with him skirting off the pitch to
Yeah.
go to the bathroom when he was having
Yeah.
a panic attack.
Mm.
And I think that it's important we find out the root.
Yes.
What's really the problem there? Um, I I don't know whether a good fish pie is really good or they're all awful, but I think that we all have our fish pies, as it were. And what I mean by that is that we all have something that we try to. It's much safer to blame that is the reason why we're struggling, rather than getting to the root. And part of that could be our self-defense, self-preservation mode that we go into when it comes to, we don't want anybody to think that we have any cracks in our armor. But the other side of that is that sometimes I think that we don't really know. And
Mm.
that's why it is important to go see an actual real therapist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of us have come up in backgrounds where you don't do that,
Yeah.
oh, you shouldn't do that. You need to just push through
Mm.
but there's people that actually went to university to learn how to
Sure.
examine what you're going through and help
Mm.
you, not necessarily give you all the answers, but put you on the right path so that you
Mm.
can help yourself. And so I'm a big advocate for that.
Yeah.
It's There's so many programs that are out there, and even if some of them cost money, I think that the price is so insignificant
Mm.
compared to what you get in return.
Yeah.
You got to
Absolutely.
find somebody that it's got to find somebody that gels with you, but don't keep blaming it on the fish pie if we want to say that.
Yeah. So
And you may
I
like fish pie. I hope I didn't dog
must.
on fish pies too much. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
going to try one when I'm over there next
I
year,
must
but
defend the fish pie. Yeah, I mean, I love fish pie.
yeah.
It's I guess the French call it parmentier, I think it's called. But
Hmm.
it's not got pastry on it or anything. It's just it's
Yeah.
all sorts of different fish with a lovely sauce and mashed potato with cheese on top. It's if it's done
Mm.
well, it's beautiful. But of course, fish can be a bit. If it's not fresh, you can have problems with fish. So I guess that's. But yeah, I think you're right. there's a lot of, it's kind of easy just to blame something like that. Everybody's satisfied with that answer. You know,
Yes.
I'm satisfied that you think it's that. Everybody is satisfied because they don't have to deal with anything difficult or awkward. So, yeah, fish pie, brilliant. We've got an
Yeah.
answer. We can
Yeah.
just leave it at that, and that's actually part of the problem. Yeah, yeah. So I'm a big advocate of seeking proper help. I obviously, caveats are, make sure you get somebody who's qualified, who's, you know, gone through that training. And there are unfortunately a lot of charlatans and quacks out there. A proper qualified therapist, as opposed to just somebody who's stuck life coach on their website. You know, I think you do
Yeah.
need to talk to somebody who can really help you and has some
Yeah.
ethics around what they're doing. So that's important. But yeah, I am an advocate for that.
Yeah.
I think, you know, for me, the lesson I learned from it, and for what it's worth, you know, other people might identify with this. I think I do believe that work is really important to us. So it's important for many of us anyway, what we do. And, you know, it gives us opportunity for satisfaction and for achieving things. And it's part of our identity. So our role at work, our life at work, we spend a lot of time there, of course, and it feels like it's important to us. And it is. But I think for me, what was happening was I was attaching too much of my own personal um, worth to what I thought was a success, and that success wasn't coming quickly enough. I wasn't achieving what I thought I should be quickly enough for me to believe that I was a success. And so it was damaging my self image. It was damaging my ego, if you like. And it was
Hmm.
making me feel like I was a failure. And I think that's really important to avoid. As a manager, this podcast is particularly directed towards leaders and managers. Almost you're self-selecting as people who care, because
Hmm.
generally people who are managers and leaders, part of the reason they're in that position is because they care about what they do for one reason
Yes.
or another. So straight away you've got this characteristic in us that is conscientious. You know, we want to achieve things, we want to make things happen, we care about the place we work, we care about the people, we care about the project. So we already have that inherent in us, many of us. And so we have to be doubly careful, I think, that we don't attach so much of our self-worth to the job that it becomes very dangerous if the job doesn't quite work, you know. And
Yeah.
nothing is guaranteed. You can do everything right and still lose 5-0 against Manchester City.
That's right. That's right.
So it's really
Yeah.
important to remember that, I think.
Hmm. And I was thinking a comparison to that would be from this episode where, and it's very difficult to say you would be different, but Jamie Tart attached his self worth to what his
That's right.
father thought of him,
Absolutely.
and you saw how destructive that was.
Mm.
And you literally had somebody that was being terribly abusive
Yeah,
to him, and yet he was still trying to get his father's approval,
that's right.
and everything hinged on that. And you see him grow out of that in later episodes. This was the turning point, as it were.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
at the end of the day, one of the quotes that stands out to me is that the only people that will remember how much overtime you worked for the company are your wife and kids. You
Mm,
could
yeah,
transpose that with anybody that's in your household, and it's so true.
yeah,
It's not that we don't give our level best to the company we work for, but at the end of the day, if we associate our worth with that,
yeah.
it's a treadmill. We're never gonna catch the success.
Absolutely. There has to be more to us than
Yes.
you know, the last project, whether we were successful or not. You know, we will fail, if we want to use that, the F word. We will fail from time to time. You know, we all
Yeah.
have those failed projects in our baggage, and that's, you know, inevitable. So okay, you know, that's, we learn from that, we move on. But it is not a reflection upon our worth, and, you know, whether we personally are a failure or not. So yeah, I think that's just an important
Yeah.
message that the episode really brings home. So it's a great episode. I really enjoy that one, and
Yeah.
yeah, again, I recommend people check it out.
Absolutely. 100%.
Okay, good. Well, we're at the half hour mark again. We've promised our listeners that we're going to keep it to half an hour. So, just want to say thank you for listening, everyone. Don't forget to do all the things. You know what you got to do. You know what you've got to do. Liking and subscribing
Absolutely.
and following. It's all
Yes.
about that. So, please do that and tell other people about the podcast. And if you want more of this sort of content, then let us know. We may well revisit the Ted Lasso universe. We have another one that you put in your list, so we probably should do that one. I've
Yeah.
also given you the job to go and watch Severance, and all listeners, you
I'm
need
gonna
to
do
do that too.
that.
Yeah,
That's my next
yeah,
goal is to get into the Severance a little more.
yeah. And so for now, we'll say goodbye. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening if you're listening on the podcast, and see you next time. Bye.